Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Neil Greig, Policy Director for RoadSmart, here with my colleague Rebecca Ashton. Today we're going to talk about older drivers, fit, healthy and determined to keep driving on this Road Safety GB Fringe session. Basically, we'll be giving you the findings of a report that we've done that's been published in the last few weeks and is available on our website, which actually talks to older drivers themselves. There's a lot of work being done on the actual types of crashes that older drivers have, but it's very rare for people to actually go out and do a big study on what older drivers themselves think and feel about driving, giving up driving and so on. So that will be the basis of our presentation. Rebecca is going to take you through the first part of that, and I will conclude with the final conclusions and recommendations. So it's over to you, Rebecca.
Lovely, thank you, Neil. So what did we want to know? We wanted to understand the driving habits of older drivers and to see if they had changed much from the 2015 survey we did, which was first looking at this research. This was a market research questionnaire based on the study and looking at their views on a range of issues and safety interventions. We intend to test some of the parts of the findings by holding workshops, which obviously we couldn't do during COVID. A big thank you must go to the DFT for funding this project. It's been a real pleasure working with them, and they have been very encouraging and supportive to us throughout the process. Their funding has allowed us to engage Dr. Carol Hawley to repeat the 2015 research that she did. Dr. Hawley did all the analysis and worked with us to produce the final report. After a competitive process, we employed a company called Opinium. They offered the best access to a sample of older drivers. And obviously the whole research problem was affected by COVID. But one of the worrying little statistics came out is that 532 people had missed their sight tests. But we'll come back to the issue of recommendations later on. So the ex-drivers had more medical issues than current drivers, and 2% of drivers are still able to drive after a stroke, which shows that it's possible to have recovered from such a medical emergency and still keep your freedom. 7% of people are able to return to driving after a knee replacement. As you can see, older drivers are very honest about their medical issues, but these don't seem to have any impact on their keenness to keep driving. The older we get, the more medications we take, which reassured us that our findings are correct and that our sample of people were quite happy to admit this. We asked a lot of different types of scenarios around their driving, but the older drivers rate themselves as excellent. But one of the areas where they don't rate themselves quite so highly was due to technology. But that possibly applies to all of us when it comes to technologies. It's coming on so quickly. This, of course, is a summary of the report, which, as Neil said earlier, is able to download. We also found that there were some gender differences when asked about their current driving. So a couple of highlights for you. They say they are confident, but there are a couple of weaknesses between the genders. Women are much more honest, but driving long distances is something that they're not really liking, and driving when tired, a top for women. But men are less confident when making right turns. The only area really where men seem to be honest about their weaknesses. These three examples from the survey show just how important it is for older drivers to drive. And for women, independence is highest when asked about the importance of driving. And of course, it's very convenient to just go out to the car rather than have to catch a bus or any other form of public transport. Men tended to feel more confident overall, but when asked about their confidence level, they did admit that there were a couple of things. If you see from the chart, men are much higher with their confidence on 8, 9 and 10. Getting people out of their cars is going to be difficult to change attitudes. The next two slides look at the ex-drivers, The key thing is that these people have given up, so they're no longer driving. So therefore, it's a smaller sample, only 395 people. But we believe that the findings are still very valid. As we said earlier, medical reasons, one of the top reasons for ex-drivers to have given up. And with cost and eyesight, that makes up the top 3 reasons. Despite what you hear, people don't seem to have given up because of an accident or because of pressure from a family member. This is the same thing, but broken down into gender. Men are more influenced by cost. As I said earlier, for women, it's much more of an emotional thing with confidence. And as you can see, that the spouse driving and the females were not enjoying driving anymore. So there is a chance there that perhaps we're getting a bit complacent as women for, you know, not necessarily driving as much as we should. Now, going back to the current drivers, we asked what would make them give up their car keys. Health problems as a very high reason for giving up, as well as family and friends suggesting. Costs also seem to be a large reason for this. And then we moved on to asking them about regulations and policies. Older drivers do support tougher regulations in general. We have picked out a couple of examples here. So the majority of those asked agreed that all drivers should have their eyes tested every 10 years. There's less support for flexible licensing to be introduced. However, only 20% totally disagreed with this. Having a medical exam around the age of 70 was also supported in general terms, and again, around 20% disagreed with this. So I'm now going to hand you over to Neil to take you through the rest of our presentation.
Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, just a quick resume here of the key question we asked about them: when do they want to give up? So these are the people who are still driving. And what we found that only 8% of the sample, only 8% of drivers still currently driving over the age of 60 had even thought about giving up. And most of them, the vast majority, want to continue driving for as long as possible. For them, that meant probably driving for another 12 years. It did vary with the different age groups, but overall, the average age at which most people thought they would have to give up was 82. Of course, what we're finding now is that there's a lot more drivers over the age of 80, so that might even be an underestimate. Ironically, that was exactly the same age as we found back in 2015. But the key message here is they haven't started thinking about it, and they think they're going to continue driving for a long time. But as we know, that's because they feel confident and they think they're good drivers. Next slide, please. I'll run through some of the key conclusions that are in the report. Although some drivers we were told that older drivers, for example, give up stressful situations, most drivers said they didn't avoid those difficult or stressful situations. They didn't tell us that in this particular report. That's because they felt confident in their abilities across a wide range of different motoring scenarios. What came out very strongly was that it's doctors and optometrists, eye test people, who are the most likely to influence them in giving up. A lot of people had kept their driving license even though they stopped driving, but of course that's for identity reasons rather than anything else. And clearly poor health was the top reason. Health issues are the key things that start people thinking about giving up. Next slide, please. Overall, people felt that they gave up at the right time. You do hear a lot about people thinking they may have given up too early, or perhaps more dangerously given up too late. But although men thought they may have left it a little late and women a bit early, overall, as a group, most older drivers seemed to be content that they'd given up at the right time. But there was a clear finding that they did feel that any training that was given to them would be about helping them to maintain their confidence, increase their confidence, and their competence of particular issues. So that's good news from an IAM RoadSmart perspective, obviously. Again, the health issues there and the eyesight, the link to eyesights. What we found is that although most people were supportive of an eyesight, they were particularly supportive of everybody having to have an eyesight. So that's every 10 years, no matter what the age. But overall, we found that the attitude towards making things a bit tougher to renew your license, linking it to an eyesight test, that sort of thing, had actually become more positive. So people, older drivers out there, are actually open to changes in the way that their licenses are renewed after the age of 70. Next slide, please. The Department of Transport were very keen that we give them some clear recommendations from this report that they can take forward in developing their policy on older drivers. As we know, they're committed to looking at the issue of older drivers as part of their current road safety review. That was issued about 2 years ago. So it is an issue that they're looking at. It's an issue that we hope to see more information from the Department of Transport on, and we're obviously feeding into that. Clearly, there's an appetite for a review of driver licensing from everybody in road safety, but also particularly from the older drivers themselves. So that review should be brought forward. We're also very clear that people hadn't started to think about giving up. So they need to look at a wide range of people who could influence older drivers. And that could be starting with pensions advisors, financial advisors, options for travel, other public transport options. Where are you going to live? That sort of thing. You need to think about all these things together. You can't think about your transport needs in isolation. And that comes down to improving the consumer information. We don't really have a lot of easily accessible information here. It's getting better all the time about, for example, which cars are most suitable, which car designs, for example, help older people to look over their shoulder most easily, to get in and out of, things like that. And also information on things like journey planning and mobility costs in the future. And we'd certainly, again, one of the recommendations we are making, as you might expect from IEM RoadSmart, because we provide these things, mature driver reviews. We think they could be a very key part of the solution in helping people to improve their confidence, keep driving safely, but also give them a chance to review. We had an interesting story recently where someone who took one of our mature driver reviews actually found out they had a really bad health problem when they failed the mature driver review. And that led to them getting extra help and solving their health problem as well as improving their driving. So wider range of benefits here. We think those could be offered on prescription in the same way that, for example, gym sessions are offered to people to help them get fit. Next slide, please. As has become very clear, it is the doctors and the opticians who are the most likely to influence people in giving up driving. So the information they share, the information that they provide to people, the way they work with people needs to be clear, and their training needs to improve. We know for certain that GPs don't get enough training on how to deal with issues such as giving up driving. They don't want to upset people they may have been looking after for their entire career. But obviously you have to have those difficult conversations. They need the training for that, and that needs to improve. And also, as we mentioned, we need to have a system that links eyesight testing with licence renewal. And that involves the DVLA updating its processes so that things like NHS databases on free eye care can be linked into the driving licence renewal. And that would help to make the system online, make it easy, and make it work much better in the future. And the final recommendation, which we've alluded to before, is that it's pretty clear that COVID-19 had an impact on the way people had their eyes tested, their interactions with GPs. There's a long waiting list of things that are being caused, NHS waiting lists, problems being caused because of COVID. We think it would be useful to look at that in more detail to see if that's having a long-term impact on the mobility choices of older drivers. Next slide, please. And that's it. That's the report. It's on our website. Happy to take any feedback, any questions, either to my email there or to Rebecca Ashton at IEM as well. I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and please go to our website and download the report, and you can see it in all its full detail. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.